This obscurity extends to Indonesian national consciousness in ways that are culturally and politically significant. When Indonesians think about their historical greatness, they think about Majapahit, the Javanese empire that united the archipelago, or about Borobudur, the magnificent Buddhist monument. Srivijaya, despite being equally important historically, doesn't feature prominently in national narratives. This is partly because Majapahit fits better into nationalist ideology. It was territorially expansive, it was based in Java where the modern capital is located, and it left behind impressive physical evidence. Srivijaya, Sumatran-based and maritime rather than territorial, doesn't fit the template as neatly. Recent decades have seen some efforts to raise Srivijaya's profile. Indonesian historians and archaeologists are paying more attention, and there have been museum exhibitions and educational programs highlighting Srivijaya's role in Indonesian history. Palembang itself has embraced the Srivijayan connection, naming streets and institutions after the empire. But compared to Majapahit or even Mataram, Srivijaya remains a secondary footnote in popular consciousness. Part of the problem is that maritime empires are simply harder to romanticize than territorial ones. There are no great battle narratives, no stories of heroic kings conquering vast territories. The reality of Srivijaya, merchant ships, port fees, commercial brokerage, Buddhist monasteries, doesn't lend itself to epic storytelling the way the terrestrial conquest does. It's harder to make a blockbuster movie about efficient customs administration than about cavalry charges and sieges. Yet what Srivijaya achieved was extraordinary by any measure. For 6 centuries it maintained a commercial empire spanning thousands of miles of ocean, coordinating dozens of port cities, facilitating trade between civilizations that had no other way to communicate, and accumulating wealth that rivaled any kingdom in Asia. It pioneered a form of statecraft uniquely adapted to Southeast Asian maritime geography, a model that proved so successful that it was copied for another 6 centuries after Srivijaya's fall. It created one of the medieval world's great centers of Buddhist learning, attracting scholars from India to China. And it did all of this without the massive population bases or agricultural surpluses that powered the great territorial empires. The evidence for Srivijaya's sophistication is scattered but compelling. The inscriptions, though few, are written in elegant Sanskrit and Old Malay, demonstrating literary and administrative sophistication. The artifacts, bronze Buddhist statuary, gold jewelry, ceramics, show artistic refinement and wide-ranging trade connections. Chinese sources consistently describe Srivijayan embassies as impressive and well-organized, suggesting a court capable of sophisticated diplomacy. The very fact that Srivijaya maintained its position for 6 centuries implies institutional continuity and effective governance. Modern archaeology is slowly revealing more. Underwater archaeology in the Straits has discovered shipwrecks from the Srivijayan period, their cargoes intact. Chinese ceramics, Middle Eastern glass, Indian beads, Sumatran gold, physical evidence of the trade network Srivijaya controlled. Excavations at Palembang continue to uncover more artifacts and structural remains. Remote sensing technology is helping identify sites buried under centuries of river sediment. Each discovery adds to our understanding, filling in gaps in the fragmentary record. But we need to accept that much of Srivijaya will remain mysterious. Unlike Egypt or Rome, where we can read the words of ancient writers in their own language, where we have comprehensive archives and inscriptions, Srivijaya left too little written record in its own voice. We see the empire primarily through Chinese eyes, through the observations of foreign visitors who understood incompletely what they were seeing. The internal workings of Srivijayan politics, the daily life of ordinary Srivijayans, the thoughts and ambitions of its kings, all of this remains largely opaque. What we're left with is a ghost empire, a civilization that was undeniably real and powerful, but has become almost invisible. The straits that Srivijaya controlled are still there, still the arteries of Asian maritime trade. Modern container ships still pass through the Strait of Malacca, still navigate the routes that Srivijayan ships pioneered over a millennium ago. Singapore, the great modern port city at the southern tip of the Malay Peninsula, occupies a location that was once part of Srivijaya's sphere of influence, performing essentially the same function, facilitating trade, providing services, taking a cut of every transaction, that Srivijayan ports did 1,000 years ago. The parallels between Srivijaya and modern maritime City-states like Singapore or Hong Kong are striking and rarely acknowledged. These modern entrepôts are following a playbook that Srivijaya wrote. Control strategic maritime choke points. Provide superior commercial services. Maintain rule of law that traders can trust. And accumulate wealth from facilitating rather than producing trade. The model works now for the same reasons it worked then. Geography still matters, facilitation is still valuable, and merchants will pay for security and efficiency. Perhaps Srivijaya's invisibility is itself revealing. Maritime commercial empires don't leave the same kind of legacy as territorial conquest empires. They don't build pyramids or temples to glorify kings. Their monuments are pragmatic. Ports, warehouses, ships, all things that decay or are replaced by the next generation. Their achievements are economic and institutional rather than architectural. And when they fall, they tend to dissolve rather than be dramatically conquered. Their functions simply taken over by successor states, their innovations absorbed into common practice without attribution. This makes Srivijaya the forgotten empire par excellence, a civilization that was enormously influential in its time, but left too little trace to remain in historical memory. The investigation continues. Archaeologists are still excavating, historians still analyzing texts, each discovery adding nuance to our understanding. But some mysteries may never be fully solved. We may never know exactly how Srivijaya's political system functioned, never fully reconstruct its cultural achievements, never hear its story in the voices of those who lived it. What we can do is recognize that Srivijaya existed, that it mattered enormously, that it shaped the development of Southeast Asia as profoundly as any stone-building temple civilization. The maritime trading superpower of ancient Indonesia pioneered a form of empire that would echo through centuries, demonstrating that you don't need vast armies or monumental architecture to be a great power. Sometimes all you need is control of the right waterway, a reputation for fair dealing, and the ships to enforce your will. Srivijaya had all three, and for 6 centuries, it was one of the wealthiest kingdoms in Asia. The fact that it's now barely remembered, that it took 20th century archaeology to prove it existed, that most people have never heard its name, this doesn't diminish its historical importance. It just reminds us that history is written by those who build in stone, and that the greatest civilizations aren't always the most visible. The Phantom Empire fades in and out of view, glimpsed in fragments and reconstructions, forever just beyond our full understanding, a reminder that some mysteries resist complete solution, and that the forgotten can be as historically significant as the remembered. The investigation continues. The evidence accumulates, and slowly, painfully, the maritime superpower emerges from the shadows, demanding recognition, insisting on its place in the story of Asian civilization.